Hi everyone, I'm Marilena, and today we're going to be talking about understanding models and countermodels and how you can use them in a debate. Everything that I'm going to be mentioning today is based on the resources that you can now see on your screen. So if anyone wants to dig deeper into what models are, how you can use them, and find a few more examples of their use, these are the materials where you can look to find this information. Three broad things we're going to be discussing today. First of all, we're going to quickly go over policy debates and what they are. Secondly, we're going to discuss what a model is and what are the restrictions that teams have to adhere to when using one. And thirdly, we're going to be discussing countermodels. Starting with policy debates. You can now see on your screen a few examples of policy debates that have been set at recent WSCCs. Generally, there are two possible phrasings that can indicate that you have a policy debate in front of you. One is the phrasing that you see in front of you right now. So if you see a motion that is this house would something, this means it's a policy motion, and whatever follows the would is the policy that the team in proposition is asked to defend in the debate. The other possible phrasing of policy motions is this house believes that X should do Y. This house believes that a specific actor should do a specific action. This is also considered a policy debate. So everything we talk about today in terms of models also applies to this type of motion. In policy debates generally, what proposition is asked to do in order to be able to win the debate is to prove that their version of the policy stated in the motion, the policy they are asked to defend, is better in some way than whatever opposition supports in this debate. And we're going to go into this later about what opposition can support, but as a general rule of thumb, this is what proposition has to do in a policy debate. And in policy debates, proposition has some freedom to choose exactly how the policy will be implemented. What are the exact steps that will be taken in order for this policy to practically be put into effect? So proposition has the ability, it's what we call the fiat, to assume that the model that they specify can be implemented. And if something falls within the modeling fiat of proposition, we're going to explain a little bit later about what are the things that fall within that fiat and that do not fall within that fiat. But if something falls in the modeling fiat of proposition, then this is something that both teams have to assume is plausible in the context of the debate. So opposition cannot contest whether this specific model, this specific iteration of the model can happen, but the debate obviously moves into a discussion about whether this is a desirable thing or not, whether we want this to happen or not. In terms of models, the details that can be provided in the models and the details that proposition can assume fall within their modeling fiat should be generally reasonable. They should follow common sense and they should be relevant to the issue that is being discussed in the debate, the issue that the policy is meant to deal with. Generally, as a rule of thumb, it should be such that the ordinary intelligent person would accept that this is a reasonable model for the specific debate. This means that proposition should model each debate in a manner that adheres quite closely to the meaning of the words in the motion and to the intention of the words in the motion and of the motion itself. Also, other than just modeling the specific policy itself, proposition also has some freedom to add specific elements to the model. These are what we call reasonable add-ons to a model that proposition can defend. These add-ons, again, should be reasonable. This means that they shouldn't reshape the world significantly, or they shouldn't reshape the world beyond the scope of the debate and beyond what the motion requires. If a team wants to introduce an add-on like this, so an add-on that significantly reshapes the debate beyond the scope of the motion, then this is not something that is covered by modeling fiat. What this means is that in order for team proposition to be able to reap the benefits of this add-on, they should be able to analytically explain and prove why this is an add-on that is likely to happen. They can't just assume that it happens in the same way that they can just assume some simple modeling details that are reasonable in the way that we talked about before. Now we're going to look at a few examples to really clarify the difference between what is a reasonable add-on to a model of proposition and what are not reasonable add-ons to a model. The motion we're going to be working on in this example is this house would legalize all drugs for recreation. So first, let's take a look at the model itself. Obviously, when we talk about legalizing drugs, this immediately means that we remove all criminal penalties for anything involving drugs. This means production, sale, use. All those things are obvious interpretations of the motion. But also things like regulating, licensing, quality controls are things that can very reasonably be expected when a policy like this is taking place. This means that they are things that the proposition can put into their model, and they are things that cannot be contested. Now let's look at what are some possible add-ons that do not immediately follow from the motion, like the details we just mentioned, but could still be things that proposition can assert happen in the context of this debate. A reasonable add-on could be that the tax money raised from the sale of drugs specifically, not from any other product, will be used to fund rehabilitation programs. This, A, doesn't fundamentally change the world or how the world works beyond the scope of the specific debate that the teams are having about legalizing drugs. And it is also quite a common thing that happens in the real world. It's quite a common real world feature tied to managing the public health impacts of a specific policy or of specific legislation. It's something that we've seen happen. This means that it fits within the modeling field of proposition. It is a reasonable add-on that proposition can assert and that opposition cannot contest if opposition has said that this thing will be implemented. Now let's look at an add-on that would not be reasonable for the same motion. An add-on that wouldn't be reasonable is saying that the government is going to offer financial incentives either in the form of tax breaks or simply cash to families to admit their addict family members into those rehab facilities. This goes far beyond what the motion itself requires, and it is also generally uncommon in the real world when we talk about policies legalizing something. So whether we should legalize drugs or not isn't immediately connected to the state using monetary tools. This means that proposition cannot assert this as a reasonable add-on to their model. If proposition wants to use this as an add-on to their model, they would have to analytically prove that this is something that the government is likely to do, not just assert that it's part of the model. Now let's look at countermodels. So generally in a policy debate, opposition has a few options about what they can support. Opposition can support a specific countermodel, so they can counter-propose a different policy to solve the same problem that the debate is discussing. They can also support a range of alternative policies and argue why those things are better than whatever propositions and the motion's policy is. And they can also say that the status quo, so the world we live in right now, is better than whatever proposition is defending and whatever the policy of the motion is. If opposition chooses to run a specific countermodel, then the debate shifts from a general debate about one specific policy to a comparison between two policies. The policy that proposition is defending, so the policy that the motion specifies, and the policy that opposition has chosen to base their countermodel on. And the debate happens which of these solutions is preferable. In terms of countermodels, they should also adhere to the same requirements about reasonableness that we talked about when we talked about propositions models. They should also be reasonable. They should also be limited by common sense. They should also only revolve around the relevant issues of the debate and not significantly change the world and the way the world works beyond the scope of the debate. The only extra addition in terms of the requirements for countermodels that opposition can introduce is that they should be different from the policy that proposition is defending. This means that they should be mutually exclusive. For example, opposition in a debate about banning smoking cannot just say that they would also ban smoking, just in a slightly different way than whatever proposition has introduced in their own model. Opposition's countermodel has to be a different policy than what proposition said. For example, this could look like banning smoking only in public spaces or regulating smoking in a specific sort of way, but something that is different enough and mutually exclusive to the policy of proposition. Yeah, I think that's all for today. Thank you very much.